So, you have watched the YouTube tutorials on Milky Way photography. You've read blogs. You have taken your equipment and you've spent hours outside shooting. But you still you don't feel like your images are quite up to what other photographers are sharing out there on social media. Your images appear grainy and splotchy, and when you try to edit them, they start to fall apart. Well, there's an easy fix to this, and I would dare say that most of those photographers that you're seeing are already doing it. It's image stacking. I'm Christopher Neal, and I've been capturing night sky images for almost 10 years now. And I'm going to walk you through a very simple process that will take your images from bland and noisy and disappointing to amazing works of art. First things first, what exactly is image stacking and why is it a game changer for Milky Way photography? Simply put, image stacking is a technique that we use to enhance the quality of nightscape photos. It involves taking multiple exposures of the exact same composition and combining them to help filter out noise in your image. This process, it can reduce the noise, it'll increase the dynamic range, it brings out sharp detail in your photographs, and that's particularly important when you're capturing the night sky, where the long exposures that we take will push your gear to the limit and it will cause your sensors to introduce noise into your images. Let's go through the step-by-step process. When you're out there shooting, y'all, as always, you want to make sure that you're using as wide open an aperture as you can possibly get. Shutter speed, usually somewhere between 10 and 30 seconds, depending on the focal length of your lens. And your ISO can vary based on how much ambient light there is. I'll usually start somewhere around 1600 to 3200 and start going up based on what the histogram shows me. Now for the stacking part, you're going to capture a series of images with the exact same settings. I've done as few as 3 and as many as 24, 25. But the sweet spot for me is kind of in the 9 to 12 range. I typically use the timer feature on my camera, which allows me to set a 5-second delay for the shutter to reduce image shake, and it will automatically capture 9 images after that. I'll usually take a shot in the beginning for composition and to check exposures, so I'll typically end up with anywhere from 9 to 12 images in a particular set. Once we're done capturing images, now it's time to sit down and start editing. I use Lightroom to import and do some basic edits on my images. I can pull images off the card, create a raw backup, catalog and keyword them all in one step. Plus, slider-based edits are pretty easy to do and it's non-destructive. We're going to open up the library module and we're going to choose the image, the first image in the set that we want to work with. And the first thing that I always address is white balance. Now I'll usually let Photoshop kind of take a guess as to what it thinks is the best white balance. And from there I will tweak it a little bit. I prefer my images to start out slightly cooler. I can always warm them up later. So I'll usually drop it down just a little bit. Now as far as global edits, I'm really only going to maybe bring the highlights down in the overall image to start getting rid of some of that haze in the air. And maybe I'll bump the exposure up just a little bit. This image was a little bit dark. Now, this set of images was captured back in September of 2023. It was some of the last nightscape images I did that year. This is from the almost very southern tip of Hatteras Island, where the Milky Way is starting to set and you can see just a little bit of light pollution from the village at Ocracoke Island just to the south of it. Now, other than adding some exposure and a little bit of highlights, I'm not going to do much to the image at this point other than coming down, and on the lens correction I want to remove chromatic aberration, and I want to maybe try and get rid of a little bit of that vignette. That's all I'm going to do as far as global edits for now anyway. A nightscape image is essentially two images in one. You've got the sky and then the ground and whatever else is around it. And they typically require a different approach to editing, vastly different editing inputs. So we do local edits, and we do local edits with masks. The most recent update of Lightroom, they have added a couple of new features. One in particular that has really changed the way I look at editing these nightscape images, and that is the addition of the landscape filters. You can choose landscape, and the AI will interpret your image and find out what it thinks is the most likely sky. It's calling these mountains, they're vegetation obviously, water, and natural ground. And together they more than cover the image, but it will kind of help you. It kind of allows you to target just certain parts of the image. Whereas before I would typically just use a linear gradient and kind of separate the sky from the ground. Now I can use these, and they're pretty powerful. Now if you want to take a little bit of a deeper dive into this, you can check out the video I've linked above that I just pushed out going into this process just a little bit deeper. But for now, I'm going to choose the sky. I'm not really going to do anything with the mountains because we can include that with the ground. So I'm going to create those three masks. This natural ground mask, I'm going to go in and use a brush to subtract a good bit of this, and I did a little bit too much, so I'm gonna add just a little bit more back. Water, add this back here. Sky looks good. So now for local edits, and the first local edit I always do is the sky, because for me the sky is the most important part of a nightscape image. As always, I'm going to drop the highlights down. I got to get rid of some of that haze in the air. I live on the East Coast, shoot on the East Coast. We have hazy skies. Next, I'm going to add some contrast to darken it down. I'm going to drop those shadows to try and bring out some of that Milky Way. Increase the whites because that'll target the stars to bring back a little bit of that detail. I'm going to drop the blacks. Not much, just a little bit because it's starting to get dark out on that edge. I don't want to do too much. I'm going to give the image just a little bit of texture, and then we're going to add in some dehaze. Not too much, it will make your image look really weird. I'm going to start at the top for the rest of the local edits. Push the whites up to really bring out the water. Maybe just a little bit of contrast. One of the problems you have with nightscape images is you can get a really flat foreground, and giving it a little bit of contrast can kind of add some depth to it. Again, I'm going to add just a little bit of texture and clarity. I'm not going to put any dehaze on that. Natural ground again, starting at the top. We're going to bring the exposure up just a little bit. boost those shadows just a little bit. Maybe a little bit of contrast. A little bit more exposure to compensate for that contrast. Whites look good, blacks look good. Tiny bit of texture. Tiny bit of clarity. And no dehaze. Now we're good. So I'm going to go back to the library module. Pull up that image. Make sure all of the rest of my images are selected. We're going to sync the settings. Make sure that I check my masks so that it applies the masks to all of the images. Now this will take a minute because it's working with those masks. So I'm going to speed this up. Now we have 10 images with all the same edits. I'm going to scroll through them here a little bit. Looks good. So all 10 are still chosen. Now the last thing I'm going to do in this step is I'm going to right click on one of them, making sure they're all chosen. And we're going to export. I have a hard drive that I've titled Working, so I can kind of keep track of my working images. It's easy to do it that way. That way I can just delete it at any point in time. I've got it set for the year, month, and day. And we're going to call this subfolder Stacking. This was captured on Hatteras, and I'm saving it out as TIFFs, 16-bit components with a resolution of 300, and we're going to export. That too is going to take a few minutes because these TIFF files are pretty large. So away we go. Now, the next step is stacking. Stacking program I use is Starry Landscape Stacker. It's for Mac. If you're using Windows, you can use Sequator, which does essentially the same thing in that environment. When I launch Starry Landscape Stacker, the first dialog box is asking me which files that we want to work with. I'm going to point to my working drive. Those were shot in 2003, September 16th. Stacking, and I'm going to highlight all 10 of these images, and we're going to open. So once Starry Landscape Stacker opens, it gives you basically a composite image of all the others. You can see you've got some real tailing in the stars. It's a combination of all the images that you've loaded up. It tries to figure out where the sky is, obviously, and anywhere the red dots are, that's where it thinks that that's sky and stars. And you can see some down here on the bottom, the ground, that's clearly not sky and stars. And I'm going to come in with erase. We're going to get rid of those. Looks pretty good. I'm going to add some dots along the horizon so they have a nice clean horizon line, and up the dunes all the way around. Make sure I get the top and the corners. Now this is done because part of the stacking process is aligning each image. Since the stars move relative to the ground, software needs to know the difference between sky and ground so that it can align sky and not ground. We're going to help it figure out where that sky is. Once we get the red dots in, we're going to choose Find Sky, and it's going to show you a mask. Mask looks pretty good. It's got a little bit down here in the water that it's picking up as sky, so I'm going to go in and adjust that just a little bit. Other than that, it looks good. So we're going to align and composite. Depending on how many images you're stacking, this can take a good bit of time. Once that's done, we're going to play around with the composition algorithm. And you can hover over it and it will kind of give you a list of what the different algorithms do. And I will usually start with one of these that try to not duplicate stars. There's two of them. One is usually slightly lighter than the other. I tend to go with the darker one, but in this case, this one is giving me a little bit more surf in the picture, and I like that. So once I get an algorithm that I want, we're going to save that image, and I save these images back into my main image folder. And we're going to save that out. And remember, this could take a bit of time because this is a fairly large image. It's a TIFF combination of a lot of other images. And with that, we're done with Starry Landscape Stacker. I'm going to kill that program. So now we're back to Lightroom, and the next step is going to be, we're going to synchronize this folder. Now I've already done this and it was acting a little bit wonky, so I've already got this file in here. It's right here. I'm going to flag it so that I can quickly and easily find it later on. And then we're going to choose one of these other images to show a side-by-side comparison. Left side is our stacked image. We're going to let that load a little bit. And we can see there's a significant reduction in the noise from one image to the other, especially in the darker areas. Now, this is an image that we can do some additional edits in Lightroom and then ultimately push over to Photoshop. If you'd like to see my full Photoshop walkthrough, there's a video linked above. Image stacking requires a bit more time, both in the field and during editing. However, those extra few minutes can yield huge benefits. Stacking has allowed me to produce some pretty amazing images over the years. Now, I hope that you found something in this video that you can use. I encourage you to get out there and give these techniques a try. Whether you're a beginner or a seasoned veteran, it's always something new to learn. Some new angle to try, some new challenge to explore. If you found this video on image stacking helpful, please consider giving it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel to grow and allows me to create more content like this. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future videos. Also, if you'll leave me a comment below, let me know what techniques you'd like to see me go over next. I'd love to hear from you. You can also connect with me across all my social media channels. Thanks for watching. Now get out there and capture some magic.